Nathan Harper had always been a man who thrived in the chaos of New York's media world. At 38, he was the millionaire CEO of Horizon Media, a powerhouse he'd built from nothing, clawing his way out of Brooklyn's roughest streets. His life was a blur of board meetings, late-night strategy sessions, and the hum of a city that never slept. But on the night of his 38th birthday, everything changed. He stepped into his sleek penthouse, the kind of place most people only dreamed of, and stopped dead in his tracks. There she was, Lila Gwynn, 29, one of his brightest editors, standing in his living room. She wore nothing but a radiant smile, her dark hair spilling over her shoulders, a small homemade birthday cake glowing with a single candle on the table beside her. "Happy birthday, Nathan," she said, her voice soft but steady, like she'd been rehearsing those words all day. His heart slammed against his ribs. For a moment, he couldn't speak, couldn't move. This wasn't just a surprise. It was a detonation of everything he'd kept locked away for 4 years. It started the day Lila walked into Horizon Media, a nervous 25-year-old with a portfolio full of raw talent and a fire in her eyes that Nathan couldn't ignore. She'd been a last-minute addition to a round of interviews, her resume landing on his desk by chance. "I want to tell stories that change how people see the world," she'd said, her voice cutting through the usual corporate noise. He hired her on the spot, telling himself it was purely professional, but deep down, he knew it was more. There was something about her, her quiet strength, her unshakable drive that hooked him from that first moment. Over the next 4 years, Nathan watched her from a distance, a silent admirer in a life too busy for anything else. He noticed everything. The way she'd stay late perfecting a script, her fingers tapping out rhythms on her desk when she was deep in thought, how she'd slip a coffee to the night security guard with a grin every Monday morning. He kept his feelings buried, hidden behind the polished exterior of a CEO who didn't have time for love, but he couldn't stop himself from caring. When her laptop started lagging, he had IT replace it with the latest model overnight. When her younger brother needed tuition money, a scholarship appeared out of nowhere. Nathan's doing, though he made sure she'd never trace it back to him. He told himself it was enough to love her like this, quietly, safely. He'd built Horizon Media from the ground up, turning a scrappy startup into a media empire. But when it came to Lila, he was paralyzed. She was too good, too real, and he was too broken. A kid from the streets who'd fought tooth and nail to escape a past he couldn't outrun. What could he offer her? A penthouse and a title didn't erase the scars of Brooklyn, the nights he'd slept on park benches to avoid his stepfather's fists. So he stayed in the shadows, content to watch her shine. But that night, as he stood in his penthouse staring at Lila, the walls he'd built started to crack. She stepped closer, the candlelight flickering in her eyes, and he realized she wasn't just there to wish him a happy birthday. This was something bigger, something he'd never dared to hope for. 4 years of silence, of stolen glances and unspoken words, had led to this moment. And as she reached for his hand, pulling him gently toward the cake, Nathan felt the weight of every second he'd spent loving her in secret. "Make a wish," she whispered, her smile teasing but warm. He didn't need to think about it. For the first time in years, he knew exactly what he wanted, and she was standing right in front of him. Chapter 1. The Silent Admirer. 4 years ago, Nathan Harper's world shifted on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. He was in the middle of a meeting, half listening to a pitch about ad revenue, when his assistant buzzed him about a latecomer to the day's interviews. "She's got grit," the note said, clipped to a resume that was more passion than polish. He'd sighed, figuring it'd be another dreamer who'd flake under pressure. Then Lila Nguyen walked in, soaking wet from the downpour outside, her dark hair plastered to her face, clutching a soggy folder like it was her lifeline. She didn't apologize for the mess, just straightened her shoulders and said, I want to tell stories that change how people see the world." Her voice was steady, her eyes locked on his, and Nathan felt something stir he hadn't felt in years. He hired her that day, telling himself it was her portfolio, sharp, insightful pieces that punched above their weight. But it wasn't just that. It was her. Lila had this way of cutting through the noise, a quiet fire that made everyone else in the room fade. She started as an intern, but within months she was editing features, her name popping up on projects that turned heads. Nathan watched it all from his corner office, pretending he wasn't paying attention. He'd catch her hunched over her desk at midnight, rewriting a script until it sang, or laughing with the team over takeout when a deadline loomed. She had no idea how those moments stuck with him, how they piled up in his chest, like secrets he couldn't tell. He kept his distance, though, always. He'd built Horizon Media from a broke kid's dream into a New York giant, but loving Lila, that was a risk he couldn't calculate. She was 25 then, 9 years younger, with a life ahead of her that didn't need his baggage. He'd grown up dodging punches in Brooklyn, scraping by on grit and luck, and even now, with a penthouse and a corner office, he felt like that kid sometimes. Rough around the edges, unworthy of someone like her, so he loved her in silence, finding ways to care without crossing the line. When her computer crashed during a big pitch, he had it swapped for a top-tier model by morning, claiming it was standard upkeep. She thanked IT with that bright smile of hers, never suspecting him. When her brother's college fund ran dry, Nathan funneled cash into a community scholarship that landed in his lap. Lila called it a miracle, oblivious to the strings he'd pulled. He even turned down a promotion for her once, a senior editor gig she'd earned, because he knew it'd mean more meetings, more time near her, and he wasn't sure he could hide how he felt if she was that close. She'd been confused, maybe hurt, but he'd brushed it off with some excuse about timing. Still, he couldn't help collecting pieces of her. The way she'd hum old jazz tunes under her breath when she thought no one heard. How she'd sneak granola bars to the cleaning crew on Fridays, chatting with them like they were family. The fierce set of her jaw when she fought for a story in a meeting, her voice calm but unyielding. "This isn't just about clicks," she'd said once, pitching a piece on immigrant-owned businesses. "It's about who we're giving a voice to." The room had gone quiet, and Nathan had nodded approval, his throat tight. She saw people, not numbers, and it hit him somewhere deep. He'd catch himself staring sometimes across the open plan office during a brainstorming session and force his eyes away. His CFO, Jack, caught on early. "You're a goner, man," he'd teased over beers one night. "Just talk to her. What's the worst that happens?" Nathan had swirled his drink, muttering, "She'd see me." Jack laughed, but Nathan meant it. Lila didn't need to know the mess beneath his suits. The kid who'd stolen bread to eat, who'd built an empire to prove he wasn't nothing. She deserved better. So he stayed quiet, letting her shine while he lingered in the background. He'd sit in his penthouse some nights, the city glittering below, and wonder what it'd be like to tell her, to say her name out loud, not just in his head. But he never did. 4 years passed like that, a slow burn he couldn't douse, and he convinced himself it was fine. Until that birthday night when she stood in his living room, smiling like she'd known all along. Maybe she had. Maybe he'd never been as good at hiding as he thought. Chapter 2. The Night of Rain and Revelations. It was one of those New York nights where the sky just opened up, dumping rain like it was trying to wash the city clean. Nathan was wrapping up a late call in his office, the 40th floor of Horizon Media dark except for the glow of his desk lamp. Most of the staff had bolted hours ago, fleeing the storm, but as he grabbed his coat, he saw her, "Lila?" standing under the awning outside, soaked to the bone. She was clutching her bag, peering at the empty street where the buses had stopped running. Her hair stuck to her cheeks, and she looked tired, frustrated, but still somehow unshaken. He didn't think twice. "Need a ride?" he called out, stepping into the rain before she could answer. She blinked up at him, surprised, water dripping from her lashes. "Nathan, you don't have to. I'll figure it out." Her voice was firm, like she hated leaning on anyone, but the storm wasn't giving her much choice. "Come on," he said, nodding toward his car parked a few feet away. "You're not walking in this." She hesitated, then gave a small nod, following him to the sleek black sedan he rarely drove himself. The first few minutes were quiet, just the slap of wipers against the windshield and the muffled roar of the storm outside. Nathan kept his eyes on the road, hands tight on the wheel, hyper-aware of her sitting there, close enough to catch the faint scent of her damp jacket and something softer, like lavender. He didn't know what to say. He'd spent 4 years avoiding moments like this, and now here she was, inches away, her presence filling the car like static. "You didn't have to stay so late," she said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was casual, but there was a question in it. He shrugged, keeping it light. "Neither did you. That documentary pitch keeping you up?" She laughed, a quick warm sound that hit him harder than it should have. "Yeah, it's a beast. I want it to be perfect. Those stories deserve it." He glanced at her then, just for a second, and saw the way her eyes lit up talking about it. That was Lila, pouring herself into every word she wrote. "Where am I dropping you?" he asked, though he already knew her address from some HR file he'd glimpsed once. "Queens," she said, giving him the street. "Near the old bakery on 31st, if you know it." He nodded, turning the car that way, and then, maybe because the rain made everything feel unreal, he asked, "You grow up there?" She shifted in her seat, surprised again. "Yeah, you know Queens?" He smirked faintly. "I know Broke. Grew up in Brooklyn, the kind of block where you kept your head down and your fists ready." She tilted her head, studying him like she was seeing him for the first time. "I wouldn't have guessed that. You've got this polished thing going on now." He chuckled, low and rough. "Ha, took a lot of scrubbing. My stepdad was a piece of work. Used to sleep on park benches some nights just to stay clear of him." He didn't know why he said it, the words slipping out before he could stop them. He never talked about that stuff, not with anyone. Lila didn't flinch, though. "My mom worked doubles at a diner and a factory to keep us afloat," she said after a beat. "Dad split when I was 10, left us with nothing but a stack of bills. Queens wasn't fancy, but it was home." Her voice was steady, matter-of-fact, and Nathan felt something loosen in his chest. They weren't so different, not really. Both kids who'd learned to fight for every scrap they got. The rain pounded harder as they hit a red light, and she turned to him, her eyes catching the glow of the dashboard. "How'd you get out?" she asked. He tapped the wheel, thinking, hustled, wrote freelance pieces for pennies, slept in a basement with no heat till I landed something steady, built Horizon from there. She nodded, like it made sense. "Sounds lonely." He didn't answer right away, because she was right, and he wasn't used to anyone seeing that. When they pulled up to her place, a modest brick row house with a flickering porch light, she hesitated, her hand on the door. "You want to come in? I've got tea, least I can do for the ride." Her tone was easy, but there was something in her eyes that made his pulse kick up. He wanted to say yes, wanted it so bad it scared him, but he shook his head, forcing a smile. "Rain check. Get some sleep, Lila." She smiled back, soft and real. "Thanks, Nathan. Night." He watched her dash through the rain to her door, waiting till she was inside before pulling away. His hands were still tight on the wheel, heart thudding like he'd run a mile. That night, alone in his penthouse, he replayed every word, every glance. She'd cracked something open in him, a door he'd kept locked for years, and as the storm raged outside, he realized he didn't want to shut it again. Chapter 3. The Dance in the Spotlight. The Horizon Media Gala was the kind of night where New York's elite rubbed elbows under chandeliers, champagne flowing like water. Nathan usually hated these things. Too much small talk, too many fake smiles. But he showed up anyway. Tux crisp, hair tamed, playing the part of the untouchable CEO. He was mid-conversation with some investor, nodding at buzzwords about streaming trends. When he saw her, Lila stepped into the ballroom and the air shifted. She wore a deep emerald dress that hugged her frame, the fabric catching the light with every move. Her dark hair was swept up, a few strands teasing her neck, and she looked like she belonged there. Not just in the room, but in some bigger, brighter world. He couldn't take his eyes off her. She moved through the crowd, greeting colleagues with that easy warmth of hers, oblivious to the heads turning. Nathan ditched the investor mid-sentence, something about disruptive content, and made his way toward her, weaving past suits and sequins. He didn't have a plan, just a pull he couldn't shake. When he reached her, she was laughing with a junior producer, her head tilted back, and the sound hit him like a shot of whiskey. "Leela," he said, his voice cutting through the chatter. She turned, startled, then smiled. That real, unguarded smile she saved for people she actually liked. "Nathan, didn't expect to see you out of the corner tonight." He smirked, loosening up a little. "Thought I'd mix it up. You look—" He paused, searching for a word that wouldn't give him away. "Stunning." Her cheeks flushed just a hint, and she brushed it off with a laugh. "Thanks. You clean up pretty good yourself." The orchestra struck up a waltz, slow and sweeping, and before he could overthink it, he held out his hand. "Dance with me?" Her eyes widened, surprised. He didn't dance, everyone knew that. But she didn't hesitate. She slipped her hand into his, warm and steady, and he led her to the floor. The crowd parted, whispers rippling like static. Nathan Harper didn't do this, didn't let anyone close enough to touch, but with Leela in his arms, the room faded. They moved together, her steps light, his more certain than he'd expected. Her hand rested on his shoulder, his at her waist, and the space between them felt electric. "I saw your documentary pitch," he said, keeping his voice low just for her. "The one about the homeless shelters? It's good. Really good." She looked up at him, eyes bright. "You read it?" He nodded. "Approved the budget myself. Didn't want it stuck in some committee." Her lips parted, caught off guard. "Nathan, thank you. That means a lot." He shrugged like it was nothing, but it wasn't. He'd fought for it, pushed it through when the finance guys balked at the cost. It was her vision. Raw, human stories most execs would have ignored, and he'd be damned if it didn't see daylight. They swayed to the music, her dress brushing his legs, and she tilted her head, studying him. "Why me?" she asked, soft but direct. "There's a room full of people here dying for your attention." He faltered for a second, her question slicing too close. "Because you see what they don't," he said finally. "You look past the bullshit." She didn't push, just held his gaze, and he felt exposed, like she could see the cracks he'd spent years hiding. The song swelled, and he pulled her a little closer, her breath warm against his neck. Around them, eyes lingered, colleagues, investors, all wondering what the hell was happening. Let them stare. For once, he didn't care. The music slowed, and as it ended, he didn't let go right away, his hand still on her waist. "Thanks for the dance," she said, her voice teasing but soft. "Didn't know you had it in you." He grinned, rare and real. "Guess you bring it out." She stepped back, but their eyes locked for a beat longer, something unspoken hanging there. Then the mayor swooped in, clapping Nathan on the shoulder, dragging him into some pointless toast. He glanced back as Lila slipped into the crowd, catching her looking too. Later, he overheard a producer gossiping. Nathan had turned down a date with a big-shot investor's daughter that night, some blonde who'd been circling him like a shark. He'd brushed her off without a second thought, too busy watching Lila from across the room. He didn't regret it. That dance, those few minutes with her, had been worth more than any networking schmooze. Back at his penthouse that night, he stood by the window, the city sprawling below, replaying it all, the feel of her hand, the way she'd looked at him. 4 years of keeping her at arm's length, and now he was slipping. He didn't know how to stop it, or if he even wanted to. Chapter 4. The Guardian in the Dark. It was late, the kind of late where the city felt half asleep, streets slick with the day's rain. Lila had stayed behind at Horizon Media after a marathon meeting, tweaking edits on her documentary pitch. She'd waved off the team's offer to share a cab. Her place in Queens was just a 20-minute walk, and she needed the air to clear her head. The streets were quiet, sodium lights buzzing overhead, and she was lost in thought, replaying Nathan's quiet approval from earlier that day. "It's solid," he'd said, handing her notes back with a look she couldn't quite read. It stuck with her, that look. She didn't hear them at first. 3 guys stumbling out of an alley, their laughter too loud, slurring into something uglier. They spotted her, lone figure in a jacket and sneakers, and one called out, "Hey, sweetheart, where you rushing off to?" Lila's stomach tightened, but she kept walking, picking up her pace, chin up. She'd dealt with creeps before. Queens taught you that. "Not interested," she said, voice sharp, eyes on the well-lit avenue 2 blocks ahead. Her hand slipped into her bag, fingers brushing her phone. They didn't back off. "Oh, come on, don't be like that," another one jeered, his steps uneven as they crossed the street toward her. The third one muttered something nasty. "Thinks she's too good for us." And Lila's pulse kicked into overdrive. She pulled out her phone, thumb hovering over 911, when a rough hand grabbed her arm, yanking her back. "I said, where you going?" The guy's breath stank of cheap beer, his grip bruising. She twisted, heart hammering. "Let go," she snapped, loud and firm, but he just laughed, his body's closing in. Then everything happened fast. A car door slammed hard and a voice cut through the night, low and deadly calm. "Take your hands off her now." Nathan Harper stood there, silhouetted against a streetlight, his tall frame coiled with something she'd never seen in him before. He was still in his suit from the office, tie loose, knuckles white at his sides. The guy holding her sneered, "Mind your business, suit," but his grip faltered. Nathan didn't blink. "She is my business," he said, stepping closer, his voice like steel. "Let her go, or you won't walk away." Lila yanked free as the guy hesitated, stumbling back into his friends. "You should listen to your girlfriend," one taunted, swaggering toward Nathan. "Walk away while you can." Nathan's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. Lila's voice broke through, edged with panic. "Nathan, don't—" Too late. The first guy lunged, swinging a sloppy fist at Nathan's face. What happened next was a blur of motion. Nathan sidestepped, quick and precise, slamming an elbow into the guy's chest. The man doubled over, gasping, hitting the pavement hard. The second one charged, but Nathan pivoted, grabbing his arm and twisting until he crashed down with a grunt. The third pulled a knife, its blade glinting as he snarled, "You're dead." Lila's breath caught, fear spiking, but Nathan didn't waver. When the guy slashed, Nathan moved like he'd done this 100 times, blocked the thrust, snapped the man's wrist with a sickening crack. The knife clattered away, the guy howling, clutching his arm. The other 2 staggered up, coming at him together, but Nathan was relentless. Punches fast and brutal, dropping them in seconds. When it was over, they lay groaning on the wet concrete, and Nathan stood there, breathing hard, knuckles bloody but steady. He turned to her, the fury in his eyes softening into something else. Worry. "You okay?" he asked, stepping close, scanning her like he needed to be sure. She nodded, adrenaline still buzzing. "Yeah, I'm fine." You're bleeding." He glanced at his hands, dismissive. "It's nothing." One of the guys twitched, trying to sit up, and Nathan shifted instantly, planting himself between her and them, his stance daring them to try again. They didn't. "How'd you—" she started, then shook her head. Where'd you learn to fight like that? He wiped his hands on his pants, voice quiet. Later, let's get you out of here. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have called it in. He guided her to his car, engine still running where he'd left it crooked on the curb. We should wait for the cops, she said, practical even now. My security guy's on it, he replied, pulling out his phone, firing off a quick text. They'll handle it. Where do you want to go? My place, she said, voice steadier than she felt. They drove in silence, the hum of the engine loud against the night. When they got to her row house, she stopped him at the door. Come in. You're not driving home like that. He hesitated, then followed her inside. In her tiny kitchen, she grabbed a first aid kit, sitting him at the table under the harsh light. His knuckles were raw, split open, and she cleaned them gently, her hands shaking just a little. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. He met her eyes, unguarded for once. Yeah, I did. She finished bandaging him, her fingers lingering on his. Brooklyn teach you that? She asked, half smiling. He nodded, a ghost of a grin tugging his lips. Had to survive somehow. She sat back, looking at him. Really looking. The CEO she'd known for 4 years was still there, but so was someone else. A fighter, a protector. And as he looked back, something unspoken passed between them, heavy and real. Chapter 5. The Birthday Night and the Truth. Nathan's 38th birthday started like any other day. Meetings stacked back to back, a quick handshake with some ad execs, and a vague plan to order takeout alone in his penthouse. He didn't do birthdays, not really. They were just another marker of time he'd survived, a quiet nod to the kid from Brooklyn who'd made it out. But as he pushed open his penthouse door that night, the air felt different, warmer, alive, and then he saw her. Lila stood in his living room, barefoot on the hardwood, wearing nothing but a radiant smile that stopped him cold. A small homemade cake sat on the coffee table, a single candle flickering, casting soft light across her face. Happy birthday, Nathan, she said, her voice steady but laced with something deeper. He froze, keys slipping from his hand to clatter on the floor. Lila, what? He couldn't finish, words tangling in his throat. She stepped closer, unbothered by his shock, her eyes locked on his. I heard you, she said simply. In the church. His stomach dropped, a cold rush flooding his chest. 2 nights ago, he'd slipped into St. Agnes, a little stone chapel he visited every year on his mom's death anniversary. It was late, the pews empty, and he'd knelt there, whispering into the silence. I've loved her for years, he'd said, voice breaking. But I'm scared. Scared she'll see me, all of me, and walk away. Give me the guts to tell her, please. He'd thought no one heard. He'd been wrong. You were there, he managed, his voice rough, barely above a whisper. She nodded, closing the distance between them. I came to drop off your presentation notes. Jordan said you'd be there. I didn't mean to listen, but I couldn't leave. Not after that. Her hand reached for his, warm against his clammy skin, and he felt the ground shift under him. 4 years of hiding, of locking every feeling behind a wall, and she'd seen through it all. You don't have to say it, she murmured, her thumb brushing his knuckles. I already know. Then she kissed him. It wasn't tentative or shy. It was 4 years of everything they'd never said, crashing into him like a wave. For a heartbeat, he stood there, stunned, afraid to move and break it. Then something snapped loose inside him, a groan escaping as he pulled her close, kissing her back with a hunger he'd buried too long. Her arms slid around his neck, her body pressing against his, and the world shrank to just them. Her lips, her warmth, the faint taste of sugar from the cake she'd baked. When they broke apart, breathless, tears shimmered in his eyes. He pressed his forehead to hers, hands cradling her face. 4 years, he whispered, voice cracking. 4 years of loving you, and I never thought—" He stopped, swallowing hard. She smiled, soft and sure, brushing a tear from his cheek. "No more silence, Nathan." They sank onto the couch, the cake forgotten, and the night unfolded in a tangle of words and touch. She traced the lines of his jaw, asking, "Why didn't you ever say anything?" He laughed, a raw, shaky sound. "Because you're you. Smart, fierce, good. And I've got a past, Lila. Stuff I didn't want you to see." "Tell me," she said, not pushing, just waiting. So he did. He told her about his mom, who'd worked herself to death in a factory to keep him fed, dying of cancer when he was 15. About the stepdad who'd beaten him bloody until he learned to hit back. About the nights he'd slept in alleys, dreaming of something bigger. And then the twist, the piece he'd never told anyone. 10 years ago, he said, voice dropping, I was engaged. Her name was Claire. We were driving home one night and a truck ran a light. She didn't make it. His hands clenched, eyes distant. I walked away with scratches. She was gone in seconds. After that, I swore I'd never let myself love again. Couldn't risk losing someone like that. Leela's breath caught, her fingers tightening on his. "Nathan," he shook his head, pushing through. "Then you showed up, and I couldn't stop it. Every time you smiled, every damn thing you did, it chipped away at me. But I was terrified. If I let you in and lost you too." He trailed off, raw and exposed. She leaned in, kissing him again, softer this time, her lips a quiet promise. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. "You don't have to be scared anymore." They stayed like that, wrapped in each other, the penthouse silent except for their breathing. She told him her own truths. Her dad bailing when she was a kid, her mom's endless shifts, the way she'd clawed her way through college on scholarships and stubbornness. "We're not so different," she said, her head on his chest. "Both fighters." He ran his fingers through her hair, marveling at her. "Yeah, but you fight for something better. I just fought to survive." Hours slipped by. The candle long burned out, and they moved to his bedroom, shedding clothes and walls alike. It wasn't just physical, it was every unspoken word, every glance they'd traded over 4 years, pouring out in the dark. "I've wanted this since that first day," he admitted, lips grazing her shoulder. "You walked in, soaked from the rain, and I was done." She laughed, tracing his chest. "I thought you were this cold, untouchable boss. Took me a while to see the guy underneath." When they finally lay still, tangled in sheets, he pulled her close, voice thick. "I was afraid you'd hate me if you knew. The real me." She pressed a kiss to his palm. "I love the real you, Nathan. All of it." The word, love, hung there, heavy and true, and he felt it settle into him, filling cracks he'd ignored for years. "I love you too," he said, the first time he'd let it out loud, and her smile was brighter than any candle. That night, as the city hummed outside, they found something neither had dared to hope for, a beginning born from years of silence, now loud with everything they'd held back. Chapter 6. Love Out Loud and a Legacy. After that birthday night, Nathan and Lila didn't go back to pretending. The next Monday, he called a meeting with Horizon Media's execs, standing at the head of the conference room table, his voice steady as he laid it out. "I've started a relationship with Lila Nguyen," he said, no hesitation, no apologies. "It's real and it's not going anywhere. We're setting up new reporting lines. She'll work under Jack now, not me. Everything else stays the same." The room buzzed, heads turning to Lila where she sat, chin high, unflinching. Whispers followed, some curious, some skeptical, but Nathan didn't flinch either. He'd spent 4 years hiding how he felt. He was done with that. Word spread fast. Colleagues shot Lila knowing looks in the break room. A few even grinned, saying, "About time." The tabloids tried to spin it. Millionaire CEO snags star editor, But Nathan shut it down with one call to legal. He didn't care what they thought, as long as she was safe from the noise. At work, they kept it professional. Quick nods in the halls, no lingering. But off the clock, everything changed. Late nights turned into dinners at her place. Her cooking pho from her mom's recipe while he chopped veggies, laughing when he botched the cilantro. Weekends found them tangled on his couch, watching old movies, her head on his chest like it had always belonged there. 6 months later, he proposed. Not in some flashy restaurant, but at a farmhouse he'd bought upstate. A quiet spot he'd fixed up to honor his mom, with a porch swing and a rose garden she'd have loved. He got down on one knee under the stars, a simple platinum ring in his hand, and said, "I've loved you longer than I knew how to say. Marry me, Lila." She didn't cry, just pulled him up and kissed him hard, whispering yes against his lip. The wedding was small, just family and close friends. The farmhouse decked out in white flowers. Lila walked down the aisle in a sleek ivory dress, her mom beaming beside her, and Nathan couldn't breathe. Couldn't believe she was his. A year after that, they were in Hawaii for their honeymoon, toes in the sand, the ocean stretching endless before their little bungalow. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky gold and pink, Leela handed him a small wooden box. "Open it," she said, her voice trembling just a little. Inside was a carved seashell with 3 words scratched into it. "We're having a baby." Nathan stared, his hands shaking as he looked up at her. "You're," she nodded, eyes shining. "9 weeks. Found out yesterday." Tears hit him fast, spilling over before he could stop them, and he pulled her into his arms, laughing through it. "A kid," he choked out, hand on her stomach. "Our kid." He cried harder than he had in years, joy and fear mixing together. "I don't know how to be a dad," he admitted later, lying beside her in the dark, the waves crashing outside. "Mine was a ghost, and my stepdad was a monster." She laced her fingers through his. "You'll be amazing. You've got more love in you than you know." He held on to that, letting it sink in, and every day after, he felt it grow. Their future, their family, taking shape. 9 months later, they stood together at the grand opening of a community center in Queens, a project Lila had dreamed up and fought for, a space for kids to write, film, create, built from the ground up with Horizon's backing. The place buzzed with people, locals, staff, kids already scribbling in notebooks. Nathan cradled their 6-month-old son Miles in his arms, the boy's dark eyes, Lila's eyes, wide and curious. An old woman from the neighborhood stopped them, smiling at Miles. "He's got your fire," she said to Lila, then nodded at Nathan. "And your strength." Nathan grinned, pressing a kiss to Miles's head. "Hope he gets her brains, too." They slipped away from the crowd to a quiet corner of the center's garden, a little patch Leela had designed with benches and wildflowers. "Remember when this was just a sketch?" she said, looking around at the life blooming there. He shifted Miles in his arms, the baby dozing against his chest. "You saw it first. I just made sure it happened." She leaned into him, her hand resting on Miles's tiny back. "We made this happen. All of it." That night, back at the farmhouse, where they'd moved full-time after Miles was born, Nathan tucked his son into the crib, watching the boy's chest rise and fall. Lila came up behind him, arms sliding around his waist. "Still can't believe he's ours," he murmured, voice thick. She rested her chin on his shoulder. "Believe it. This is us now." They stood there, wrapped in the quiet, the life they'd built stretching out ahead, messy, beautiful, real. Later, in bed, he traced her arm, thinking out loud. "I used to think legacy was the company, billboards with my name, headlines. Now," he glanced at the monitor, Miles' soft breathing crackling through. "It's this. Him. You. What we're giving back." She smiled, sleepy but warm. "Told you you'd figure it out." He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "Couldn't have without you." From a silent love that started in a rain-soaked interview to a family standing strong, they'd built something bigger than either of them had dreamed. And as the night settled over the farmhouse, Nathan knew, whatever came next, they'd face it together.